Hi, so it's December 31st, 2021, New Year's Eve. It's relatively early here in Rochester, New York, and some of you may see this tonight, and a lot of you, because of where you are in the world, you may see this on New Year's Day. So, first of all, I would like to say Happy New Year to all of you. May it be a better year than you've ever had. May it be filled with laughter and with good health and success and everything and anything that you do. And now I would like to tell you a little story of 2021. Many of you know that I came here in 1967 as a result of being exiled from Tripoli, Libya. Libya is a country, but Tripoli is where we were. And we were exiled, just for being Jewish, and that was the beginning of that. And, well, not the beginning, but it was certainly was actually the beginning of my coming here, but it was the end of our existence in Libya, as of today there are absolutely no Jews left there. That's not exactly what I'm going to talk to you about, though. The essence of what I'm telling you about, though, requires that context. And when I lived in Libya, of course, I had a mother and I had a father. My father's no longer with us, but our last name was Nahum, and Nahum were considered, the Rockefellers of Libya, certainly the wealthiest family. Now, that being said, I grew up not really knowing anyone from my father's side of the family. There were some on my mom's side, but not so many there were not even so many. There weren't any on my father's side. And while now I can look back and say, well, it wasn't that odd. I had no cousins. My father had no cousins, no uncles. I didn't know my grandparents because one passed away before I was born, and the other one, I believe, I was very young. I don't remember, but the fact that there were no relatives is really odd. Now, in '67, once we got to Italy, and there were more conversations regarding the situation. We were now refugees and so on and so forth, and my parents had to decide as to where they would go and live for the rest of their lives. Decisions had to be made. They made, and my mom had chosen Israel because we have family there, and my father had chosen the U.S. because he thought that perhaps he could access his assets back in Libya, since we were really only allowed to take, the four of us, the equivalent of about $100. Now, go back a second to the fact that, we had relatives in Libya, in Israel. And that's why my mom wanted to go there, because, family helps family. But I did not know that we had relatives in Israel. Why did I not know it? Well, because I think of the situation in Libya being what it was for Jews, and any notion of Israel that to this day Libya does not have diplomatic relations with. Okay, to let a kid know that there might be anything to do with Israel, just slipped out of my mouth one day that we had relatives in Israel, and someone can then say, "Oh, you're in contact with them," and just extrapolate all these issues, and that would be very problematic. And so I was really never told about it until we got to Italy, until we were in freedom, that I was told we had, these relatives in Israel. But that was explained to me. It was explained to me who these relatives were, and they were all immediate family to my dad. In other words, his three sisters, his brother had passed away in Libya under the British bombardments. And there were three sisters, all of them married, all of them with kids, now living in Israel, different parts of Israel, and they had all left around 1948. Pogroms, like the ones that got us finally out, had occurred in 1945 and 1948 and 1956. So this, at every point, there was a diminishing number of Jews living in Libya. By 67, there were 6,000 of us. And eventually we all left under extreme duress, and we're now all over the world. Again, context for what I'm about to tell you. So I knew of no family in Libya on my father's side. The one thing that I did know was that my grandfather, Rahamin, Italian name would be Clemente, had a cousin, and his cousin was Halfallah Nahum. Well, Halfallah Nahum was, in essence, one of 7 Nahum children, the patriarch of the family, and extremely wealthy, he and the rest of the family, with many, many businesses, including Ruber Afer and many land holdings, and on and on and on. But I didn't know any of them. Halfallah Nahum was killed in Libya in the early 60s. My grandfather had died before that. Anyway, I just didn't know them. Nothing was ever said, and didn't know them. Come to 2021. A schoolmate of mine from back in Libya, Dr. David Gerbi, contacted me, and he is putting together a project. He's been working on it beautifully and meticulously to put together interviews of the Libyan Jewish community to tell our story. In other words, to have an oral testimony of what happened. Now, collectively, we all know what happened. Collectively, we all had the same thing happen. We were persecuted, and we had to make a choice: stay and die or leave. That's the general. However, what is being captured here is, by Dr. David Gerbi, is the details of where we might have hidden. How did we hear of the war? Where did we hide? How did we get out? That differs one family from another to some degree. Many similar, but still some differences, and it's important to get our oral history before none of us are here to talk about it. So I was one of the early ones. I think there's over 50 interviews now, and they're reaching museums in Israel and are being disseminated among the Libyan Jewish community, about half of which is in Israel and maybe another half in Italy, with a few others dispersed throughout the world, like myself in the U.S. So I received a message on Facebook by a friend from Libya, from our community, and she asked a very direct question. She said, "Do you know Marina, Gabi, and Margot Nahum?" And I said, I don't, but you need to understand that I didn't know anybody from my family for some reason, which I still don't know why. But, so no, I don't know them. And she said, well, they would like to talk to you. I said, well, great, I'll talk to anybody, So Marina and I got on the phone. I don't recall if it was FaceTime or not, but basically, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but basically she said, she asked me, do you know what this video did? And I said, no, of course not. No, I don't know. And she says, well, when I saw it, my heart stopped because, I looked at you and, I was seeing my father and your hands, the way you moved your hands, the shape of your hands, the way you spoke, your mannerisms, my dad, and I said, well, okay, I don't know, great. And she began to tell me who she was and a bit of our story. And she wondered whether we were related, if we were cousins. And we began this communication and exchange of whatever knowledge we had. And coincidences began to emerge in stories that were common. And we found that we feel we're related, we're cousins. And so a phrase that I used was that, by the way, I can't even begin to tell you how I feel about it, and I know that the same has been expressed to me, of this discovery. I like to think of it as having been found. I was found by my family. A phrase that I coined in speaking with Marina. I said, our family, our immediate family, was like a branch without a tree, and you are now presenting the whole tree to us, certainly to me. And she began to tell me, again, stories and send me pictures, and some of which I may be flashing here or not. I'm not so sure yet as I'm talking into the camera. But the feelings were tremendous. Really can't be put into words. The having been found bit. It's really hard to express how happy I am that they found me, through this interview. And we now plan to see each other, of course. And Marina has done extensive research into the family, and in doing so, it changed completely what we expected, our trajectory out of Israel once the Romans conquered and expelled so many of us through the world. That our trajectory had been going north into Turkey, into Europe and across Europe and into Spain, and then leaving Spain in the 1400s as a result of the Inquisition and going back across North Africa. As it turns out, that is not the case. The case is that she has found documents that take us back to the 1700s in Italy, in the city of Pisa, in Tuscany, Italy. And so what makes me think, therefore, is this, that while Jews were expelled from here to there and everywhere, and over 2,000 years certainly walked to every corner of the world, there's not to say that Nahum didn't go wandering and then walk into Italy and down to Tuscany, and there he made a life. There is, however, historical facts that when the Romans went back after destroying the temple and conquering Israel and expelling many of us, there are historical facts that show that they took slaves back to Rome. So could it be that we were part of the slaves that were taken back 2,000 years ago? And eventually, I guess eventually we were freed, like many slaves in other places, and unfortunately, not like some that continue to be enslaved. That's another topic for another day. But the point being is, we got to what was the Roman Empire then, but Italy, the area of Tuscany, and from there eventually came down to. Actually, many centuries later, came down to Tripoli for business. And I remind those who have any interest in Libya that Tripoli at one time was 25% Jewish. It had 43 synagogues. Think about that. 43 synagogues. That's a lot of places to pray, to really point out the presence in Libya, our presence. And so that's the story that I wanted to tell you about 2021. That in the middle of the craziness of our government, of the world, of COVID, I found myself in a spot where I'm ecstatic, I'm happy. Besides the fact that Rose, as some of you see on my social networks, on Facebook, I should say, mainly, see Rose, and she has come into our life, and she makes me very, very happy. And but there's other pocket of happiness, of goodness, which was being discovered by my cousins, from which I am now squeezing as much of the history as possible from. I will get myself to Italy as soon as I possibly can to say hello in person and embrace this newly found family that I belong to, the Nahum family. With that, I say goodbye. I again wish you a very happy New Year, and may you experience all the joy possible, and a very healthy and prosperous New Year. Goodbye. Peace.